Fox College football analyst Joel Klatt is presented each week by MyBookie.ag. Use code NEXTROUND to double your initial deposit. That's MyBookie.ag, code NEXTROUND. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag, code NEXTROUND. What is up, Klatt?
Yeah, I'm right, Klatt. That's independent Utah playing Colorado now. They
dropped out of the Big 12.
They dropped out of the Big 12, right?
Yeah, but apparently, a new development. Mark Harlan, just athletic director of Utah, just blowtorching his new conference. That's fun times, man. I tell you what a time to be alive in college football. Huh?
What a time.
Lance and I are unified on this. Jim is slow playing it as not to landmine his favorite team, Alabama.
No.
But there are 2 times this year I've watched Alabama and I thought I'm watching the best team in the country. One was obviously against Georgia, and I thought another one was Saturday night. And I don't know that LSU's tremendous, Joel, but just the complete game Alabama played Saturday night, I felt like I was watching the best team in the country.
So I think a lot of that, you're not wrong. First of all, so they looked great, and what I'm starting to realize, like, college football is just changing so fast, guys, so fast, and there's more parity. You would agree with that, right? There's more parity in the SEC.
No doubt.
You know, any of the top 6 teams can beat anybody. Maybe top 7 teams can beat anybody, and then you'd still have to deal with teams outside of that. Vanderbilt, you still have to do. So there's more parity, which means similar to the NFL, I think the way that you look can be more matchup dependent than it is actually just who are you. You know, in the past, we could evaluate teams and not take into consideration really who their opponent was. You know, what did they do? How did they look? How did their offensive line play? So on and so forth. But I think that matchup now can create narratives that maybe like aren't exactly accurate. And I'm not saying that you're not accurate by saying Alabama is very good. They played tremendous, but the matchup was so favorable for them because LSU cannot stop a running quarterback. We talked about this. I think we talked about this. We should have. If I didn't, then shame on me. LSU has had so many problems with guys that could scamper. We saw it with Marcel Reed when he came into the game in that A&M game, just in one half and the damage he did. So the 185, yeah, it was high, but it wasn't totally a surprise from Jalen Milroe because he's the best athletic quarterback that we have in the country. I liked more so than that the defense, because remember early in the year, remember when I told you guys I was like, Alabama's defense is concerning. Like their structure, they give up too many big plays, a good passing game. I told you like they could be vulnerable during the course of the year. And so the way they played defensively was actually what I was more impressed with, more so than even what Jalen Milroe did, which was exquisite.
Yeah, I mean, going back and look, I know you can't take the half away against Tennessee, but, you know, they shut Tennessee out that first half. So if you take those 2 quarters and the last 8 quarters against Missouri and LSU, they've given a combined 13 points.
That's right.
Yeah, when you're not giving up points and you've got a quarterback like Milroe, I agree with you on the point on the defense. Let me ask you this, too, because Dunaway brought it up earlier when we had Tyler Booker on. And Jalen Milroe, if you went back to October 19th against Tennessee where he had 14 carries, 11 yards, and he was very hesitant, and then what we saw on Saturday night where he averages over 15 yards a carry against LSU, just completely gashing that defense for 184 yards, that's not physically the same guy, right? There had to have been something limiting him 3 weeks ago.
I don't know that to be a fact, but it's certainly a safe assumption, to your point. But I think it also goes to my point about matchup. Like Tennessee's defense is way better than LSU, like vastly better. Tennessee and I think Texas are the 2 best defenses in the SEC. Tennessee might be the best. So, I think that has something to do with it as well. They're faster and more athletic in the defensive front than LSU. They're much better on the defensive line. They're much more disciplined in their rush lanes. There's nowhere to go for Milroe because they have length and athleticism. They can play structures of defense that limit the ability to execute designed quarterback runs. So Tennessee is just a much worse matchup for Alabama than LSU. This is why I took Alabama all day long with the 2.5. Weren't they given 2.5? And I was like, that's low, because the matchup just suggested Now I was 1-4 on the week, so it's not like I'm making great selections. Thanks a lot, Georgia. What was that?
Yeah.
By the way,
we're getting
sorry,
to
I know you
that.
didn't
Yeah.
ask
That's-
about that, but like, what are we doing, Georgia?
Yeah, that's the question right now. Is what is Georgia like? I
Well-
don't even think I have a problem. They played a tough schedule and they've got a great win against Texas, but do they even hang on into the 12 tomorrow night? I guess so.
Probably, just because once you look past that, it's like, well, is Miami better than Georgia? Probably not. You're gonna have like the brand issue with an SMU. You should. I thought you put it perfect. What is Georgia?
Yeah.
Georgia is this year. And this is going to sound like way worse than I intend it. Let's just take previous years. In previous years, the outlier moments were the moments of poor play from Georgia. Those were the outliers. They were a great team that threw up like these weird nights against guys like, remember at Missouri a couple of years ago, or like some of those Kentucky matchups. But those were outliers. Now this year, it's the opposite. The outlier are the quality moments. Second half Clemson, second half Bama, first half Texas. And other than that, what they are is an okay team. This offensive line is struggling really bad. Did you guys, I mean, I'm sure you guys know, and Lance, you do a good job with the stats. They're 50th in the country in total offense. They were a top 5 offense each of the last 2 years. They still have their quarterback. I watched the film from the Ole Miss game. I don't think it's a Beck problem. I know that he's, quote, turning the ball over, but guys, they are totally disconnected as far as the timing of their passing game, when he's ready to throw and when the pictures are actually developing from the wide receivers. So that's number one. The wide receivers are slow to develop, which leads to Beck holding the ball an extra beat, and then the protection's terrible. So now he's running for his life. The ball gets tipped, it gets intercepted, and everyone's like, oh, 14 turnovers in the last 6 games. Now, have they all been circumstantial? No. And does he have to play better? Yes. But when you're out there and you're playing behind a bad offensive line, a wide receiver group that will not produce pictures on time, and when they do, they're having 3, 4, 5 drops a game. Like good wide receiver corps guys will drop 3 or 4 or 5 passes a year. They're doing it every game, like ejecto button on some of those pads. Now, are the conditions difficult? Yes, but this is a pattern. So I'm very concerned for Georgia's offense. They do not drive the field and score. Again, their lone touchdown was a 4th down touchdown when they got the ball on a short field because of a good quality defensive play. They don't drive the length of the field against good teams. They needed a trick play to do it against Texas, so they scored 30 points. Everyone's like, oh, that was really good. 23 of those were with short fields. They drove the length of the field one time. They needed a 43-yard trick play to do it. And Ole Miss, they don't drive the length of the field once. So now they're going to, and I get it, they're at home, but you're going to face a Tennessee defense that I just told you, and I think we would all agree, is a top 2 defense in the league. Do we really think Georgia's offense is going to play well this week? I don't think so. The bulk of the work, the past performance, which suggests future performance, would say no.
You can tell me this is stupid, and this is just something that I've been thinking about for a little bit, because we all know Nick Saban got out at the right time for him. The timing for some people, it was very interesting. We are in a new world of college football. You said it in a different way when we talk about the parity now, but you can't coach an athlete in 2024 like you could just a couple of years ago. And I just wonder if there's something with Brian Kelly at LSU and Kirby Smart. I mean, these guys are old school. They're very vocal. They're very hands-on. Do you think there's anything internally with today's athlete that can, you know what, if you coach me like I don't want to be coached, I can take my ball and I can go somewhere else? Do you think behind the scenes there's anything with that? Because I do think Nick Saban got out in front of this.
Not stupid. It's a good. It's a good question. I do believe that there are still players out there that want to be coached hard. The good ones do. The bad ones that you have to avoid are the ones that you cannot coach hard. Let me give you an example. I believe, and I know that Bama fans will hate this, but I believe Jeremiah Smith is the best young player in college football. I think Ryan Williams is also great. So let me preface this, okay? So don't throw this comment out just because I said Jeremiah Smith is so good. But when I talk with Brian Hartline, who's the wide receiver coach at Ohio State, and I talk to him about Jeremiah Smith, he says, like, I have to tone it down because he wants too much. Like, he goes, I have to pull him back because he wants all the coaching all the time. He wants me to criticize him. Coach, don't tell me it's a good job. And because of that, I think he's going to be a great player. Is that more unique now in college football? Probably. And I will tell you, it makes roster construction more important. To me, it's not about the players you get, but it's the players that stay. And if you can build a team that is coachable in the way that you want to coach them, that's where the sweet spot is. I believe that's what happened at Michigan last year. Guys, I'll tell you this. I was with that team. God, what did I do? 8 of their games last year. They wanted to be coached hard. You know what I mean, Lance? Like, the coaches couldn't coach them hard enough in like the best ways possible. So if you have a team or players that don't want that, you probably need new players, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Listen, I know it's easy for us to talk about Georgia in a negative light without complimenting Ole Miss, but can I just ask you about Lane Kiffin? I thought it was his most mature coaching job he's done in a game because he took field goals and didn't press fourth downs. What do you think of that coaching performance from Lane and that Ole Miss team?
It was as an adult a performance as I've seen from Lane in maybe ever. And maybe the conditions had something to do with that. Maybe the enormity of knowing that his back was against the wall, that another loss puts them out of the playoff, knowing what they invested into this team from a roster construction standpoint and how well that they've done with NIL. Maybe it's the enormity of the situation where Lane finally realized, like, no, like this is going to work. And maybe, just maybe, it is, I know my defensive line is owning this game, and they're not going to score, and they're not going to drive the field to do it. So all of these points are more valuable. I'm not in a shootout, so I don't need 40 points. 28 might as well be 45 in playing Georgia, because they're not going to drive the field. And I think all of those things played a factor. But you're right. I thought that Lane did a great job, and more specifically, man, that defensive line, they owned Georgia. It looked awful. Georgia's offensive line looked awful, and all the credit has to go to Ole Miss because they were disruptive. They were active. What did they have? 5 sacks in the game, So I was very impressed, and now it made me kind of pause and look, like pull out of this situation a little bit and say, okay, 30,000 feet. They had the lead the entire game against LSU and then get beat late. They had multiple chances to win that game, and Lane was sick after that game. Sick. And you know why now? Because he knows that this is a team that really should be 9-1, and if they were, guys, they'd be ranked 4th in the country. Right? At a minimum, they would be in line to play for an SEC championship game.
If Vandergrift doesn't complete that 4th and 7 or whatever where they went up top.
The 4th and 7. You're exactly right. So we wrote this team off a little bit, I think, to our demise as the college football public. This is a really good team,
Joel Klatt with us, courtesy of MyBookie.ag. Code NEXTROUND doubles your initial deposit. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag. When you use code NEXTROUND, it doubles your deposit. Iowa State has lost back-to-back games, which now gives Colorado, your school, a clear path. They control their own destiny all the way up to a national championship. I am not going to be two-faced. I never in a million years thought we would be having this conversation about a Deion Sanders coach team. I doubted him.
You can pull the clip. I told you guys before the season
You
this
did.
was an 8 or 9
And
win.
you got killed for it.
We laughed behind your back. We were like,
You
Klatt.
laugh. No, try behind my back. I've got video. I can see your smirks. You think you're hiding behind those microphones like this? I know what you're doing behind those hats. I see the smirks.
Hey,
Yeah.
and this weekend might have been their best performance. And the reason I say
Yes.
this is it's a tricky place to play at night. It was an absolutely slow start where they get down double digits. They're 2 of 13 on third downs. They have 14 penalties, but they end up winning the game by double digits. So there was a lot of adversity inside of the game. I think personally they're the best team in the Big 12 right now.
Yes, that's not hyperbolic. That's absolutely the truth. And you referenced what I was just going to reference. They didn't do anything in the first quarter, and that was an emotionally charged place. Remember, Tech had just beaten Iowa State in Ames. Like, this is not a lowly place. It was like, oh, the crowd got up for one game for a 2-win Tech team. No. This is a Tech team that, if they won, were right in the thick of things, had only 2 losses themselves in Big 12 play. So they're right there. And Joe McGuire is a solid coach. The place is on fire, and the first quarter goes down the tubes for Colorado. It's 13-0. They haven't done anything offensively. They've given up 2 quality series from Texas Tech right down the field. It doesn't look good. And from that moment forward, guess what they did? They ran off a 34-7 stretch. 34-7 on the road against Tech. Like, that's impressive, guys. Their defensive line did to Tech what Ole Miss did to Georgia. You look up, they had 6 sacks and 10 tackles for loss, that Colorado front. They are real on defense. They totally stopped Texas Tech. They've got speed on the outside. Shedeur is very good. And then they messed around in the fourth quarter. So they throttle them in the middle 2 quarters. And then in the fourth, they start doing just, I don't want to get too frustrated, but like 8 minutes to go, you've got a 2-touchdown lead, and you get a short field, like, in the game.
Yeah.
And they're out there trying to get Travis Hunter the Heisman, and it's like you don't need to force the ball to Travis Hunter for him to win the Heisman. He's going to win the Heisman if they get to the Big 12 championship game. You know why? He's 1 of 1. He played 170 snaps. 170,
It's
guys.
remarkable.
It doesn't sound real.
No, it really not. I can't believe you had
It doesn't
170
sound
snaps.
real.
Yeah.
And he goes out there and he's got, nearly 100 yards. He's the best player on the field, 9 catches, 99 yards, a touchdown, 170 snaps. Now, the official tally is going to be lower than that. I go by PFF, which counts penalty snaps, because that's a snap.
Yeah.
right.
He went up and picked a ball off on a penalty snap, and so to me, it's 170. Travis Hunter will win the Heisman if Colorado makes it to the Big 12 championship game. So they don't need to force the ball to him. So they can start to try to play smarter in those fourth quarter situations than what they did. They allowed Tech an opportunity to try to win that game. And, I mean, thankfully for them, that didn't happen.
So it is the big noon kick, Saturday, 11 Central, noon Eastern, Utah and Colorado. What, if anything, and the answer may be nothing to either one of these, like just the natural observer would say, is the reaction that Utah gets all the calls now after that? Or is the reaction that Colorado's a national championship playoff contender? We got to protect them too, or is it none of the above? You would love to say it's none of the above. I get it. I understand that.
It's a tough position. Generally speaking, the better teams in the conference get the calls.
Correct.
Which is the problem with conference-based officiating and conference-based replay. Miami has had some really beneficial replay sequences at the end of close games, right?
Yep.
BYU got the benefit of that call. So I do want to talk about that call because I think you guys will like this because you guys are sane individuals. So to me, that's a 50-50 call. It's a subjective call. Is it holding? Is it not holding on the Utah-BYU game? I don't know, right? Like sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. So there are people trying to be like, yes, it absolutely is. No, it absolutely isn't. They're both wrong. It's a gray area. It's like a strike zone. It's subjective, which means that it doesn't matter what was called. It matters what was called prior. what was established as the strike zone that day for the defensive backs. Because then if it rose to that level and is called, fine. But if it didn't, then we've got a problem. So it's more to do with consistency rather than letter of the law on the call. And we're talking about, if you're just joining us, the BYU Utah, the 4th down defensive holding penalty, not pass interference, but defensive holding penalty. It would have ended the game for Utah. They would have won. And they lost because this call gives BYU a 1st down. So here's what was called prior to that against Utah for the entirety of the game. 0 defensive pass interference calls and 0 defensive holding calls.
Wow.
Which means that that official is telling me that that action rose higher than any contact during the course of the game, which I don't believe is accurate. So to me, it's a problem with inconsistency. So what did they call against BYU? 1 defensive pass interference call in the whole game, and that was in the 1st quarter. So you're telling me that that was the most egregious defensive holding at any point in the game, and I disagree with that. So to me, it's not a wrong call or a right call. It's an inconsistent call, which is where the frustration should arise.
But and I'll add one more thing, is as the checks have gone up to these conferences, one way ESPN has done this is they've drastically reduced their level of production at these games. Some of these games are produced remotely. Some of them are student crews shooting them.
Right. To explain that to the non-TV people, the Big Noon Kickoff has a full-time crew of professionals,
Yes.
blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah.
closer to what
the
so
Herb
for
Street
instance,
game.
what you're trying to say, like when we go to a game, Big Noon or ABC Prime or a CBS game, there are anywhere between 60 and 95 people on the crew. Every camera is operated by a human. There are mountains of tape machines. We have 2 trucks. We have EVS operators. We have tape producers. We've got an army of people there covering the game. A Remy broadcast means that the truck is actually not even on site. It's probably a 6 to 8 camera show, not a 16 to 18 camera show. So the looks are limited.
That's it.
And more importantly, there's probably only 2 tape operators and not 6 tape operators, which means that those 2 tape operators are trying to get the inputs of all 8 cameras and decipher what's going on in order to give replays. Now, I will say that the replay officials do have access to all the cameras, and they operate independently of the television's replay sequence that we see at home. But what they are beholden to is the number of cameras that production has.
That's right. And
so
it's
to
not,
me, when you're talking about this, it's about the level of production means the number of cameras.
And I'm not saying it's reviewable, but I'm saying as a fan watching that game, I had much rather have seen a replay where the guy drags him and tackles him to the ground, and I'm like, okay, you had to call that.
Yeah.
But the
And you
replay,
didn't.
but the
And by
replay
the
we
way,
get from a mile away because they've only got 6 cameras at the game.
And again, if they called that 4 times that night,
Exactly, yeah.
I would be like, okay, well, that's a hold. But the fact that they didn't, then it's not. Again, a strike in the 2nd inning can't be a ball in the 9th, and vice versa.
Just because of
If
the
we're
moment
taking
of the
a
game.
baseball analogy.
That's right.
Yeah, you can't get caught up.
That's right.
It's a big moment of the game. I'm going to call it different than I did any other time. You can't do that.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Again, it's about consistency, not letter of the law.
Okay, back to Colorado real quick, and I know this is pure speculation on your part, but Shedeur, Shiloh, Travis Hunter onto the NFL after this year. The speculation, what does Deion do? I don't know if you saw Micah Parsons completely do a drive-by on his coach, Mike McCarthy, after the loss yesterday, and it led Rex Ryan to talking about it's going to take a special coach under Jerry Jones. And he brought up the fact that, last night you saw Dan Campbell, a former Detroit Lion, is coaching his team and having a lot of success. D'Amico Ryans in year 2, a former Texans, having a lot of success. Deion Sanders to the Cowboys. I think the answer is yes, he would take the job. Do you think that would be a fit, and do you think this is his last year in Colorado?
I sure hope not. I don't know. I don't see a scenario in which Deion would go to the NFL to coach against Shedeur.
Interesting.
I could be wrong.
After yesterday, Shedeur could have started for the Cowboys. I think he's.
Here's the thing.
He's
I
better
think
than
Shedeur
Cooper
could
Rush.
start for half the league.
Yeah.
He's going to be a top 3 pick, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He'll be the number 1 quarterback taken. Absolutely. The only question about Shedeur is going to be everything that comes with Shedeur. So Lance, it's a good question, man. I think that if Jerry came to Deion might entertain that and go do that. I don't know. He treats his players as he's the alpha, and he mentors them as kids. Does that work in the NFL?
No.
I don't know. Would he change that in the NFL? I'm not sure. He's not bringing. I'm not saying that he's not schematically intelligent, but he's not bringing like some sort of magical scheme with him. So his staff would have to be very good, which it is right now for college.
But I think one of their points, or Rex's point, is at least he's got instant credibility. Like, they're going to respect him. And I think that's the problem. When you have a coach that's not respected, I think you're seeing it in Chicago. You're obviously seeing it in Dallas. It becomes a disaster in season once you lose a couple of games.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm hemming and hawing because, like, I don't want to see this, guys. Like, I want him at my school.
Well, I think
we worked hard to get him there.
Yeah. I think another good point is Nick Saban's way of being a head coach worked wonderfully in college, and it didn't resonate in that locker room at Miami. And I don't know. To your point, I don't know.
They also chose Culpepper instead of Drew Brees.
Well, they did, but the biggest issue Saban had is he is undeniably the boss in Tuscaloosa.
That's right.
And he's in a locker room of a bunch of bosses in Miami, and he did not handle that well.
Yeah.
Well, and by the way, at Colorado, Deion might have, in theory, a boss. He don't have a boss.
Yeah. No, you're right. He's the alpha.
And that's the way Saban was.
That's the way
and
Saban
that works.
Yeah.
And that
100%.
works.
It's the way Kirby
By the way,
I
know that we're running low on time here.
Keep
One
going.
point that I did want to make real quickly about the SEC, and you guys have already maybe made this point. I do think, and I think fans down there need to wrap their head around this. If you look up right now, 3 games left, I think there is absolutely going to be a 10-2 SEC team left out.
Yep. I agree.
And then becomes like, well, who is that?
Even beyond Missouri, because Missouri could still be 10-2, and it was absurd
I'm not even absurd. But Drinkwitz with his like, we're in the playoff
absurd.
hunt. Oh my
No.
God.
No, but-
like,
but-
bro,
but-
what
but
do you do?
Klatt-
They've been on the road twice in the SEC,
I know,
got beat
destroyed.
75-10 combined.
They're out
Like,
of it.
get out of here.
More importantly, and I'm sure you've talked about this, you say a 10-2 will get left out. If there's a 10-2 that play for the SEC championship and they lose,
Which is almost a given at this point.
I think that's different. I do think that that's different. 9-3 does not get you in. 10-2 does not guarantee you get in unless you're in that game. I don't think, and I'm trying to remain consistent here because for years I've argued that you should not be penalized for making the conference championship game.
And I agree.
Some team sits at home and then you get beat. That's not like they can't get an advantage because you qualified and went and got beat.
That's right.
right? I mean, you look, you're probably going to have 2 10-2s, and one of those teams is going to lose. And so I've said this all
Maybe
along.
2 10-2s. Tennessee's got a chance to get there, and then the winner of that A&M Texas game has a chance to get there. So you could have 2 11-1s, but you could have 2 10-2s, which would be a mess. I don't even know the tiebreaker.
Yeah, I think
the
I would
17
rather.
what are we doing?
It's going to come down in the SEC to opponents' win percentage. SEC opponents' win percentage. Which,
Well, that helps Georgia then because their schedule has been brutal.
but I think right now
Helps Alabama.
It helps Alabama the most because Alabama's played.
Does it?
Yeah, I think Alabama's played Georgia, Missouri. Even though they're a fraud, they're still a good record.
Gross.
I know LSU, South Carolina, Tennessee.
South Carolina's done a great job,
I know
guys.
South Carolina's a good football team.
They've won 3 in a
Yeah.
row.
Yeah.
I actually commended 2 teams. One of my favorite things about college football, and we never focus on it in November because we are always focused on the playoff. One of my favorite things about this sport is when a team and a program get better and they progress and they develop and then they play much better at the end. It shows this determination and grit and teamness. There's 2 teams that I mentioned. South Carolina is one of them. They've lost some close games to good teams and continue to get better and better. And UCLA, guys, you might not like. I know they've lost a ton of games, but you look up the losses were like Indiana, LSU, Penn State, Oregon. Then they lost a close one to Minnesota, and now they've run off 3 straight wins. I love stories like that, and we don't we don't focus on them enough in our sport, but UCLA, South Carolina, they've done a nice job.
And by the way, South Carolina, 12.5-point favorite against ranked Missouri this week.
Yeah, that's about to be over. Eli Drinkowitz,
dude.
I know.
Like,
so silly.
Hey, but Deshaun Foster, 4-5, 3 games left. That includes Washington on the road this week, then USC at home, and then Fresno State at home. If he wins 2 of the 3, he's got that team in a bowl game.
Amazing turnaround.
That's remarkable.
Yes.
That is a remarkable year for them. Meanwhile, guess who might not get to 6? Nebraska.
Yep.
After all the pomp and circumstance, and they're sitting there and they're still sitting on 5 wins.
Friend of the show, Matt Rule. That's our guy, man.
Hugh Freeze in year 2 ain't getting to a bowl.
No, he's not.
No, he's not. Dude, that Missouri schedule from the jump has been gross.
Well, it's what we talked about. Like, they got a legit
Means
shot
we're
at
in the playoff
Yeah.
hunt. That's right. I said it, and I'm like, that is awful.
That's the dumbest thing that was said this weekend. All right,
I agree.
big noon kickoff. It is a fantastic game. Utah at Colorado, 11 o'clock on Fox. Klatt, Gus, Jenny, the entire crew will be there. Thank you very much, Joel. Have a great week.
Appreciate you guys.
All right,
Love
buddy.
it.
Love it. Love it every week. That is Joel Klatt with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. He's presented each week by MyBookie.ag. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag. Code next round when you visit MyBookie.ag.